Hello, and welcome to the 2023 Watershed Congress virtual sessions. The Watershed Congress is organized by the Delaware Riverkeeper Network in collaboration with many organizations, including my organization, Pennsylvania Sea Grant. My name is Zach Nemick, and I'm a part of the Watershed Congress Organizing Committee and also today's moderator. Today's session is the Watershed Congress keynote titled Ecological Status and Perceptions of the Schuylkill River. We are pleased to present our speakers for the session. And now I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, Tim and Michael.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tim Fenchel, and I am with the Schuylkill River Greenways National Heritage Area. We are based in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and Michael is with Princeton Hydro. He's going to do a little bit of an introduction when I turn things over to him in a few moments, but just wanted to, I'm going to sort of set the table for this presentation, the first couple moments here, and give you some background as to how we ended up taking on this project and deciding to move forward with it, and then turning it over to Michael to get into the real meat of this project and the data and the information. So go ahead, and Michael, you can advance to the next slide. So if you don't know us, the Schuylkill River Greenways National Heritage Area, we are one of 62 national heritage areas in the country. And our mission is to connect residents, visitors, and communities to the Schuylkill River and the Schuylkill River Trail by serving as a catalyst for civic engagement and economic development in order to foster stewardship of the watershed and its heritage. That's a mouthful of a mission statement, but ultimately that boils down to the fact that our job is to champion the Schuylkill River and the communities that support it. We do that in multiple ways. Michael, you can advance the slides. The main way that we do that is we are working to complete the Schuylkill River Trail, which is a multi-use rail trail in southeastern Pennsylvania. When it's complete, it will be 120 miles long, and it will run from Fort Mifflin in Philadelphia all the way up to Frackville, Pennsylvania, which is on the other side of Pottsville. That's our big project. We are working to do that, and currently there are about 75 or so miles complete. They're not continuous, but certainly lots of data out there as to the benefits of long distance trails. Rails to Trails has lots of great information on long distance trails and the benefits they bring to communities, economic development, downtown revitalization, all those sorts of things. And so that is our big project, the Schuylkill River Trail. We also host this annual Schuylkill River Sojourn, which is our biggest event of the year. It's a 7-day canoeing and kayaking event every year, drawing attention to the river as a natural and recreational resource. We also host lots of events and programs, youth-based education events all up and down the river and on the trail as well. And so our work has us in front of the public in pretty much everything that we do, whether it's youth programs or adult-based education or just having ambassadors and staff out on the trail itself. And so we are constantly asked one question. Michael, you can advance the slide. We are constantly asked by the public, is the river healthy? Is the Schuylkill River actually healthy? And so, answering that question has a lot of layers to it. And there's lots of data out there as well, lots of, pretty significant scientific data that many of our partners have. But we found that it wasn't the easiest question to answer for people and residents that maybe don't have the depth of scientific background or understanding of a lot of those things. You can advance the slide, Michael. And continually getting asked that question, we realize that there is a perception that still exists along the banks of the Schuylkill, up and down the river, that it is heavily polluted, dirty, unpleasant, potentially harmful to people. This is a t-shirt that actually you can buy online that somebody has decided to make profit off of that negative perception. And so this is a perception that our organization constantly runs into and bumps into. And so, as a group that champions the Schuylkill, we felt like we needed to start answering that question for people in a way that's understandable and digestible. So, Michael, you can advance the slide. And so, like I said, there's lots of data out there, but what we think we wanted to do, what our plan was, is we wanted to answer the question for the regular person, for your neighbor, for the person you bump into at the grocery store, or that's getting coffee next to you at Wawa. Those are the kinds of people that we really thought we would try to design this project and try to direct this project towards. Try to boil down, gain some information, and boil it down to a level that was digestible for the regular person. So we decided through some conversation with some partners, go ahead, Michael, you can advance the next one. We approached 5 partners, Berks Nature, the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education, Bartram's Garden, Stroud Water Research Center, and Princeton Hydro to come on board with us. And we thought we would try to begin to answer that question. How can we help people understand whether the river is healthy or not? Whatever the answer might be. We certainly knew anecdotally that it was healthier than it was 100 years ago, with a lot of the effects of abandoned mine drainage and the coal industry. Certainly we are healthier than it was during that time period, but we wanted to help people understand the current condition of the river. Is it safe to kayak on? Is it safe to fish in? Is it safe to swim in? What does that mean? What does a healthy river mean? What does it look like? So through this partnership program, we tried to answer that question and just start to tell the story, tell a little bit of the narrative of the story in the state of the Schuylkill for everyday people living and visiting right along the Schuylkill. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael with Princeton Hydro, and he is going to walk us through, as I said, like the meat of the project, what we did, what our direction was, what questions we tried to answer. And I think you'll be really interested to see where we landed with this project and some of the things we learned. So, Michael, you can go ahead and take over.
All right, thanks a lot, Tim. My name is Mike Hartshorne. I work with Princeton Hydro as the Director of Aquatics, and my background's in so, as Tim said, we're looking to understand the ecological status of the river and convey this information to a layperson or a citizen scientist. So the project site, when we say the river here, we're talking about the main stem of the Schuylkill River, and that's starting from our most upstream partner, Berks Nature, all the way to our most downstream partner, which is Bartram's Garden in the tidal section of the Schuylkill in Philadelphia. And before we kind of launch into really the meat of the project description, I'd like to just provide some general background history of the Schuylkill River. So the Schuylkill is certainly historically, after colonialism came through, and prior to colonialism, the the river and the surrounding lands were the home to indigenous peoples, of course, and with European settlers and increases in industry, the river was really a working river in the 1800s and the turn of the 20th century. And one of the major usages of the river was as a transport for coal from Schuylkill County all the way down through Philadelphia there. And you can see here in a photo just how much really intense industrial activity was occurring immediately along the banks of the river. And you can think of, how that may have polluted that waterway at that time. The river was known for having some of the most polluted water in the country. And this, photo on the left here shows a meatpacking plant up in Bridgeport, a little upstream from the city. And on the right, the investigators holding some of the examples of that processing pollution with, discarded animals and so forth in this water. But in turn of about 1950, one of the major restoration projects began, and that was the desilting effort. And this project was basically a large dredging exercise where the engineers were removing decades and decades of silt that had been deposited into the river as transport of coal from upstream to downstream occurred. And certainly most recently, there's been quite a bit of extensive study of the water quality of the river, with a lot of that effort spearheaded by one of the key project partners here, Stroud Water Research, located down in Avondale, Pennsylvania. Dr. Ruth Patrick, the founder of Stroud, on the left, and some data points from a research study conducted by Stroud in 1996 through 2007, where benthic macroinvertebrates were collected and utilized to ascribe quality to different sections of the river and its tributaries. So there's certainly a lot of different partners that are trying to really understand the quality of the river and to track, the changes in quality over time. And what, a lot of this data allows us to do in a renewed focus on water quality and linking, the trail system to water quality and getting more people involved, is funding has become available for a restoration project. And, one of my favorite projects is the Black Rock Sanctuary, located in Phoenixville. And what's showing here is a photograph of an expansion project of what's currently in place. And the base sanctuary was the conversion of a lot of these desilting basins into naturalized wooded wetlands. So this restoration process, really turned, what became a degraded site that was necessary to dispose of the spoils from the desilting project, as taking that a step further and further rehabilitating that land for wildlife habitat, for recreation opportunities, and also for water quality. And some general points, the Schuylkill provides drinking water to over 1.5 million people in this area, probably more than this at this point. The fishery includes many important native fish, one of which is the American shad, which migrates up the Delaware and the Schuylkill rivers in the spring in order to breed. And it's also the Schuylkill is the Delaware River's largest tributary. And as Tim mentioned, it's very popular recreationally for kayaking, for fishing. We have the Regatta Boathouse Row, and biking along the trail system. And the launch into what this project really entails, again, the partners listed at the top here, they were invaluable in collecting the data and really seeing this project through. The 4 key partners being Schuylkill, Bartram, Schuylkill River Greenways, Schuylkill Center, Bartram's, Berks Nature, with a lot of technical support provided by Stroud and kind of pull everything. So we really wanted to understand what the community concerns were related to river quality. And then we wanted to take that data and to develop a volunteer-based monitoring program to address those concerns with data. And then we want to evaluate this data and to share it to the stakeholders to ultimately increase the engagement with the river and the trail system. The first step was understanding public perception. So we wanted to know what the community concerns are. So we went right to the community. And we worked with a firm called Opinion Works to develop a community survey. And a lot of time and effort went into this collectively as a group, really thoughtfully craft the questions to most relate to these folks and to get the most true and honest answers about perception. This survey was distributed to folks located within a certain distance of the river along the adjacent counties. So Berks, Chester, Montco, and Philadelphia counties. And we received over 300 participants in the survey, which was great. We got a good amount of data back. And some of the high arching questions here, we saw, do you care about the river? A very simple lead-off question, do you care about the river at all? And certainly over half of the respondents in some capacity cared about the river. We asked folks, how often do you do these types of activities along the river? And you can see here, kind of from the left going to the right, as we move more so towards the right are more water-centric activities, and left are more passive activities here. And certainly the majority of the folks that utilize the river in our responding group utilize it kind of a little bit from afar. So they would bike, they would walk, they would nature walk along the trail system, stop the picnic and so forth. But there was less activity for the more water-centric things, certainly less swimming. The eating fish was pretty much out of the question for most of the people here. And even canoeing and kayaking and so forth was kind of on the lower end of this scale. We want to know if things like kayaking or fishing were something that would potentially be interesting to these folks, but there's something that's stopping them from doing that. What are those things that's stopping them? Why do they think it's why are they not using it? So we asked folks about the factors, and some of the highest ones is the general notion that the river is dirty or contaminated and that it's unsafe. Definitely the second one here, not enough free time. That's probably something for a lot of folks here, but there's this general notion there was contaminated water. It just wasn't safe. So 41% said it was dirty or contaminated, and 34% thought it was unsafe. So we wanted to know if folks thought it was unsafe or contaminated. We wanted to dig a little deeper. What do they mean when they say that? Why is it contaminated? And interestingly, the number one category with 85% respondents, it was trash and litter, which I wasn't really thinking of when we were starting this project. Certainly was thinking about things such as people might say mercury or PCBs or metals or some of those contaminants, but number one was trash and litter. There was general concern about chemicals and quote toxins for the second category, and then bacteria like E. coli, which we've heard a lot about, especially with sewage systems and things of that nature, was number three. So we thought, from this data, what type of monitoring plan could we realistically develop that was accessible to trained volunteers and also citizen scientists that could help collect data that would be reflective of the answers for this survey. So we want to, ultimately the monitoring plan was kind of divided into two components. And the first component was water quality monitoring. And this monitoring was conducted, again, by the partners and by folks within those groups that were assigned to this project and were thoroughly trained, with technical support provided by Stroud and Princeton Hydro. And this monitoring included the measurement of a suite of in situ parameters on a continuous basis, and also collecting discrete grab samples for E. coli and having that analyzed. prior to implementing the actual sampling, we wanted to make sure that everyone was trained. They understood exactly when, where, and how to collect samples, how to fill out chains of custody for the laboratory, how to properly package and send samples, what to do with the data in terms of data management when it comes back, and things like that. So, we really developed a pretty detailed technical monitoring plan that's shown here on the right. And this monitoring, the focus was in situ monitoring with Enviro DIY mayfly units from Stroud. And the E. coli analysis was conducted by sending samples to an analytical lab, but also in-house by the volunteers with the 3M kits. And these 3M kits are relatively low-cost E. coli analysis kits that folks can do right there, at their property and get data back relatively quickly. Again, just to show spatially the stations, which are in the red dot for this project. And the Enviro DIY mayfly units are also spread out regionally here, which you can see in the blue dots. And I just think this is pretty cool to see, this network of citizen science data collection that's occurring all throughout this region. And when I say in situ, what does that mean? So we're measuring it in the river using the Enviro DIY sondes, which are shown here in the photo. You see a solar panel up top. It's a solar panel charged battery, and the battery and the electrical components and the telemetry is all located within that small brown Pelican kit. And the telemetry beams that data up to a website every 15 minutes or so. And then you see the cables running down the pipe and then out into the river where they're connected to all the sensors. And those sensors are measuring temperature, they're measuring oxygen, specific conductance, and turbidity. It's important when we deploy these sensors to continually check on them to make sure they weren't being stolen, the probes weren't becoming fouled, they weren't becoming embedded in silt after a storm, things like that. So when the loggers become online and initiated, the telemetry unit beams up not only the data, but also kind of the general status of the units. So folks could log onto the website and quickly check the sondes every day or two. And you'll see if things are good to go. You're in your green dots here. And if you have sensors that are down, or there may otherwise be a problem with low charging or something like that, they're shown as the red dots there. And this is just an example of the type of data readout that we get using this data collection method. This is specific conductance. You can really get a cool long time series view of your data, and you can parse out any potential trends and relate those to use in the watershed, weather, suite of different variables. Temperature, one of the core components we collected, and all this data is available in a companion technical report. So we'll just briefly touch on some of these data results. The in situ temperature data. Why do we measure temperature? It controls the rate of a lot of the biochemical reactions in river systems, photosynthesis, organism respiration, things of that nature. It can also affect the organisms in the river. So certainly fish can become stressed when water temperatures are really high. And one of the reasons why is because the higher the temperature goes, the lower the solubility of gases, including oxygen. So you have really, like maybe in August, you can have really low river flows, high temperature, and a lower oxygen content. So we wanted to measure that. And these temperatures can change, and you can see thermal degradation in a river or stream over time as the watershed is converted from a forest down to suburban, urban land, things of that nature. So we collected quite a bit of data, tens of thousands of data points throughout the year, and distilled it down pretty simply for the reporting into an average, a median, and the lower and upper quartile. And we compared this data to quality standards, shown here in the dark maroon, which is the entirety of the main stem for our project site. We were in the warm water fishery category, and the cold water fisheries, which have much more stringent temperature standards because of the trout populations in the stream. They're primarily in the upper reaches of the watershed, the headwaters there, where there's the least amount of development and typically, the most forest cover. Overall, our data was within the warm water fishery standards as well but to show, one of the variables that can lead to changes in temperature, and we talk about development, and a lot of that development can be seen with impervious land cover. So impervious land cover are things like driveways, roofs, all things that really alter rainwater when it falls in the watershed. So typically you would think rainwater would fall, hit tree leaves, slowly infiltrate through the ground. As we kind of remove trees and pave things over, a lot of that water falls and quickly gets funneled into the river. It's typically warmer than it would be in a forested system. And we're also removing a lot of the tree cover that provides shade, from the sun. So all of these can influence temperature in the watershed. The dissolved oxygen, of course, low dissolved oxygen stresses all fish, particularly things like trout. But we're in the warm water fishery where the standard is greater than 5 milligrams per liter. And you can see reductions in dissolved oxygen as the system becomes more productive with algae. And you can have really large increases in oxygen during the day and then dropouts during the evening. And that's one of the concerns there. And you can also see reductions in DO just from loading of organic material and silt and things that will lead to higher bacteria respiration and use of that oxygen. So, again, just some simple statistics here. And we did see, we were typically over that water quality threshold at all of the stations. There was definitely some spatial differences from Berks Nature down to Bartram's. We didn't go into a lot of trying to parsing out why that was, but that may be something for another project. Conductivity is the measure of the ability of water to pass an electrical current, and typically in the wintertime can increase from application of salts for snow melting. It can also occur, if you have like a sewage leak or another point source that a pollutant with a lot of dissolved solids. This is a good parameter to potentially detect that. So there's not a water quality standard for this. So we're kind of looking at this, between stations and also around adjacent waterways. And typically, these measures I'm seeing here are what I would expect for this water body. And then for moving on to the bacteria sampling, the lab measures, we utilize Microbac as an analytical laboratory on the left. And then the 3M kits I referenced previously, this is what they look like. Here's where you apply your sample to the growing medium and you incubate it. We used a very simple chicken egg incubator. And then after a period of time, you count the number of E. coli colonies. And the data that we got from this is ultimately, what we were seeing is under storm flow, so following a rain event, we saw the bacteria exceed water quality standards, routinely and at all stations. And this wasn't really surprising for us, given what we know about the watershed between stormwater influences and sewer overflows and things of that nature. The combined sewer overflow being a system that during a rain event, the sewage treatment plants can become overwhelmed with water and they bypass some of that treatment and can release partially treated or untreated sewage into the sewer system and can get flushed right into the river. But during base flows, so outside the influence of rain events, you think you might have 3 days of sunny weather, no rain or very little rain. We're seeing the bacteria levels were, at least with our data and at our stations, we're below that PADP swimming threshold. So from that information, it's showing us that typically when folks are out and about, a day like this, it's sunny, it's starting to become spring temperatures. If folks want to kayak, at least our data is showing, the bacteria levels are pretty low in the river there. And then just for, other volunteers and citizen scientists, we did want to compare the 3M kits to the more expensive lab analysis. So we provided all of this data in the technical report to help folks make decisions on which method is best for their group. We certainly saw that the lab measures are the most accurate, but the 3M kits can definitely be useful as a screening mechanism. If you have a group going out kayaking and you had a rain event, maybe 4 days ago, it could be a quick way of kind of ascertaining if there are still high levels of bacteria in the river or not. And when we talk about the sewage treatment facilities and the combined sewer outfalls and so forth, not surprisingly, a lot of the red dots are in Philadelphia and Norristown and so forth. And there's also seems to be quite a few package plants located in the upstream reaches. The second component, kind of outside the quote water quality component, was a community science trash visual assessment. And while the trained partners from the 4 partner groups collected the water quality data, which required some training, some on the ground training with the bacteria kits and so forth. This portion we were hoping could be distributed to a broader citizen science group, stakeholder group, and really anyone could do this, anyone with a phone that could access the internet. So we developed a pretty simple survey form here, which is still active. We're still collecting data, even though the project's complete, at bit.ly/litter form. And there's also a companion technical document that tells you how to do this for folks that may be interested. And this is also available on the store. We also provide some guidelines for folks. You might say level of trash. You see, we have these categories here ranging from poor to optimal. So we provided kind of a visual representation of the different categories and rating areas. And we also provided kind of this flyer here and a whole social media kit to get the word out. And on the right here is kind of a low expanded look at the litter form survey. You can enter your name, organization, contact info, date, time. If you have your phone with you, this will geolocate your survey to where you're standing with the coordinates there. And then it's simply radio buttons for rankings for each category. So pretty simple to do. And we had over 100 responses from community scientists. So that was great. We're really happy with that. And we show a lot of this trash data on the Arc StoryMap, which we'll get to at the end. But this is what it looks like. Seeing the ratings here from poor, red to green being optimal. We saw that between 73 and 90% of the sites were rated as optimal. And a lot of those points, which indicates some sample bias, was certainly around the Phoenixville Valley Forge area. And we had quite a good distribution and good number of data points above that. Below that, where there's more population, we didn't have as many data points, but where we did, not surprisingly, we saw higher levels of trash. Being more downstream, just being around more people, not surprising. Number of pieces, we saw a similar distribution there with a lot of optimal scores around Valley Forge. And there was probably about 10 categories here that covered anything from is this a dumping site or not, down to is the litter hazardous for humans or aquatic life, things of that nature. And ultimately, we wanted to take this social survey data, the water quality data, the bacteria data, and we wanted to get it out to people. Really, we wanted to show people how we did this, what data we have, and encourage folks to continue this program on their own with collecting trash data, and also to become more engaged with the river and to get your friends and families out. So we do have these technical outputs here with the water quality sampling plan, trash sampling plan. We have all of this in a technical report. So folks that really want to dig into the details, you can do so. And the digital water quality files are available via monitormywatershed.org. Again, which is a really cool website that's developed and kept up by Stroud Water Research. There's also more community-friendly output, so output that is hopefully understandable by a wide audience. We do have a digital media toolkit for the partners to promote these efforts. And we developed an interactive story map, which is really cool. We're really excited about it. And we'll kind of scroll around there a little bit at the end. But for folks that may want to bring it up now or at a later point, the web link is there on the bottom in the yellow. That's bit.ly/Schuylkill River. This is the link again for folks that may want to just jot it down. Really our broad results, from this effort is the river has improved markedly, as Tim had mentioned, certainly in the past 100 years. We think about a lot of folks that may not even stop at the river, and if you ask them, what is the quality of the river, they'll say it's horrible. And there's a lot of that, potentially generational pass down of, the interpretation of the quality of the river, because historically it did used to be in very, very bad shape. But it's a vibrant corridor now. There's a lot of opportunities for recreation. We see that during base flow, the bacteria levels were low. A lot of the in situ water quality data looked really good for the category that the river is in. but still the river faces many challenges. We do have a changing climate. We have a very large population that stresses ecosystem services throughout the watershed. And we have things like combined sewer overflows that can, really impair water quality during some of these rain events. I want to say, ultimately, what can you do? How can you get more involved in the river? With all the groups that are participants in this conference, a lot of them are great resources. So Schuylkill River Greenways volunteer portal up here at the top. Berks Nature has a great ambassador program and does a ton of work with folks with watershed monitoring study. We have the Schuylkill Scrub cleanup, the Clean Sweep, and then the Schuylkill Sojourn, as Tim has mentioned, which is occurring this year, June 17th through the 23rd. So I want to say thank you, and I want to bring up the map, really briefly and kind of show folks what that looks like. So I'm going to transfer over to, okay, so hopefully this is showing for everyone. This is the landing page for the story map. You see here on the right, the categories. We have the overview, public perception data, trash assessment, monitoring, exploring the data, and so forth. And it's a really simple and kind of intuitive and visual way to go through the project that we hope people will explore and kind of check out. Kind of show where the partners are located, throughout the watershed and something about them. And definitely want to thank all of these people. Without the folks from these groups, this project couldn't have happened. Eduardo at Schuylkill Center, Chloe at Bartram's, Tim and Sarah at Schuylkill River Greenways, Dave and Rachel and John Jackson at Stroud, Michael Griffith at Berks Nature. They were all really, they really drove this project. Go through all the public data here for folks that want to scroll through. The trash assessments, all of that information. There's an interactive map as well, where you can kind of look at the different categories on the left and how they're represented throughout the study area. And if more folks are able to collect data, this spring and summer and upload that, this map will become updated as well. The findings and report tab, here you can download the technical water quality report and the protocols. And then finally, getting involved. Really, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to understand the river, and we're trying to get this information out and to get people out recreating along the river, sharing this data, also participating in your own volunteer programs, whether that's a cleanup, data collection, advocating for the river to your politicians and your local stakeholders. All those types of efforts. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, and I'm going to stop sharing. And if we have any questions, I think we can take those. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Mike and Tim. Excellent keynote, very insightful. Many aspects just are awesome. So thank you both. So yeah, questions. You could take questions. Once again, that feature is in the menu. So there's obviously they're open for questions right now for about the next 10 minutes. Also, Sherry has dropped the links to a lot of those technical reports, the story map, and all those other relevant links in the chat. So this is a question in the chat. But how did you encourage and recruit citizen scientists? That's the first part of the question. And then how can other organizations learn about your approach and adopt it to increase data collection elsewhere? So it's a two-part question.
Yeah, for the citizen scientists for the trash data collection, I know we did a lot of outreach via social media. We developed the social media toolkit that all the project partners use to get the word out. And anytime there were kind of local events with these groups, they would plug kind of the litter forum and try to get people on board that way. Anything I missed on that, Tim?
No, each of the centers had volunteers that came alongside of staff to help with sort of cleaning the sensors and monitoring them. And we had a great turnout from that. We actually, our organization, SRG, the two volunteers that joined up through this project still oversee and still manage on a weekly basis, go there and clean the sensor every week. And we had just a really great turnout for that, not huge numbers, but very dedicated volunteers that came to this project. And I can only speak for our organization, but we went to our existing volunteer base, and then also put out a call for volunteers on social media and newsletters and things like that. So that's sort of how we approached that. And we had good success, I think.
Then how can other organizations learn about your approach and adopt it to increase data collection everywhere? I'll let you add to this, but certainly, we're trying to get word out, through talks like these. Trying to speak to folks that are interested, and hopefully you all that are kind of have your ear to the ground for river conservation can then also take this program out wider to your watershed groups and so forth.
Yeah, I would encourage you to look, go to the Model My Watershed website that Stroud oversees and manages. I think there are now something like over 220 mayfly sensors all throughout the Delaware watershed. So look and see if there's one close to your organization or your home. And you can see if Stroud has any need for help there. I know that they're using all of those for data collection, and they're looking for more places to sort of launch those things. So yeah, I think there's opportunities down the road. We haven't decided yet whether we're going to bite off a phase 2 to our project yet, but that may be coming. So yeah, I think those are our answers for that question. Thanks, Kelly.
Awesome. Here's another two-part question. Any thoughts on the connection between limited access in the lower river and the lack of reporting on litter there? And then any insight on the increasing access and awareness of access?
I definitely, on the lower river, in the more urban areas. Yeah, I mean, anywhere, there's limited access that more than likely influenced that data collection phase. I know can be some constrained areas down in that section. I'm not as familiar with the entirety of the trail network there, but yeah, that certainly could be a good reason why.
Yeah, I mean, that was an issue we talked a fair amount about at the beginning, particularly with the litter app. I mean, the litter citizen science litter reporting. You don't want to encourage people to go on private property, and how do they report if they do see something that is on private property? How is that reported and handled in a thoughtful and respectful way? And yeah, so, public access to the river is certainly one of the things that Schuylkill River Greenways is a part of our mission and we're working at. And there is limited access, you're right, in the lower sort of probably from, Norristown on down through Philadelphia, really limited public access spots. So yeah, that possibly could have impacted why we didn't get as many responses from that area, but we are working all the time at trying to get more public access. I think the fish and boat goal is to have public access every 2.5 miles or 5 miles. I can't remember off the top of my head which one that is. But we are working to do that, particularly in communities like Conshohocken and other places like that. East Falls just as recently installed a new public launch there of public access. So it's happening. It's just slow, and we'll continue to work at it as best we can.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess a question for me is, have you, either of you, thought about like signage about the efforts from this project, whether that's the public perception or the Enviro DIY centers throughout the trail system or near those, I guess, the data collection points?
We did put up signs at each of the sensors that we installed for this project, more a little bit for education and awareness, but also in hopes of maybe potentially avoiding vandalism for something strange that's sitting in the woods or along the trail. And I think that generally worked. We only had one of the 4 sites that was tampered with. So yeah, signage is a hard thing sort of out in public. How do you do it well and keep it minimal without trying to, you know, be too invasive on the natural setting? Most of the things that we did were on social media and through the story map, the communication. So we didn't do much for signage, and we haven't really talked about anything along those lines moving forward.
Thank you. Do you all feel that there's a need to get the word out about the water quality of the river outside of rain events before a phase 2 of the project?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think maybe a larger, broader communication effort, public communication effort would be helpful in some capacity, and that potentially could be a good phase 2. You know, the 2 big takeaways for me after this project concluded, one was that we just need to continue to realize that the general public, it's what they see with their eyes that they think about most. A lot of the, you know, people in the scientific world think about other factors in the water quality, but the public generally, you know, things they see like trash and litter as the number one thing they think about. The second thing, you know, was the health of the river following storm events. And that isn't new information, right? I mean, that's information that lots of our partners have had, you know, Philadelphia Water Department, DEP, EPA, you know, folks that are doing this every day. They've known that information for quite a while. So that's not necessarily a new piece, but it is something that is a consistent takeaway from all this. And so, yeah, that might be a good question and a good way to go, Zach, with making the public aware of that, maybe more so than they are.
Agree fully. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, if possible, before we close out. But I'll give a couple seconds to see if there's any questions in the chat or the Q&A. And I don't think there is. So oh, there is. Are you 2 open to doing talks to other groups of river users?
Yep, absolutely. We'd love to. We've done, of course, we've done this one 2 times during this year's Congress. Michael and I also presented this past fall the Schuylkill Action Network's annual meeting. So yeah, we would absolutely be open to continuing to present at different forums and formats or local groups, whatever. Yep, totally open to that.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Sorry, Mike, did you have anything else
No,
to say?
I just said absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you both again for this excellent keynote and for sharing your expertise to kick us off for the Watershed Congress. And so I want to encourage everyone to visit the virtual exhibit hall page on the Watershed Congress website. That's your like one-stop shop for more information about our supporters, opportunities to connect, and resources for your work. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.